Institutions of higher education in North America and some parts of the world have increasingly used service learning as a method of teaching to prepare students for their chosen profession, as well as to promote the practice of community service. Defined by Kay as guided or classroom learning deepened through service to others in a process that provides structured time for reflection on the service experience and demonstration of the skills and knowledge acquired. Service learning has gained the interest of a number of faculty and academic institutions due to its idealistic goals and practical uses. Making unique contribution to addressing community, national, and global needs, service learning does not only cultivate critical thinking among students, but that the combination of community service, academic knowledge, and reflection can also help students develop an understanding of the root causes of social problems. In contrast to volunteering and other forms of experiential learning, reciprocity is essential in the manner by which service learning is carried out. Both the university and the community mutually benefit from the community service rendered. The students are able to better appreciate their chosen discipline as they apply classroom learning to real-world situations, while the community gains in return for having their identified needs met. Ideally, the voice of the community is heard throughout the planning and implementation of service learning. This would signify the university's intent to form and build a partnership with the community. Transformative partnership happens when there is a deeper and sustained commitment between the community and university, as represented by students and faculty. Growth is nurtured, and new relationships, identities, and values may develop because of shared goals and openness to collaborative efforts. Individuals involved are then not only transformed from this partnership, but also the wider society. Unfortunately, not all service learning can lead to transformative partnership. Enos and Morton suggest that most service learning initiatives are transactional, whereby there are mutually rewarding exchanges between the university and community. Such service learning takes place within existing structures and is rather task-oriented. Commitments are usually limited, and as a result, not much has changed. But as Clayton and colleagues point out, service learning can likewise demonstrate one-sided relationships that fall short of transactional and in some instances are even exploitative. This is characterized by incurring more costs than benefits, either for the university or the community, because decisions are made in isolation and without consideration to the other. Change may happen for the worse, and a sense of dissatisfaction may arise. For this reason, there have been growing concerns on how service learning can accentuate power differences between the server and the served. The university, in many instances, is seen to occupy the realm of solution, whereas the community is relegated to the domain of the problem. Instead of focusing on the strengths of a community, the university is looked upon to fill in the deficits of the community it serves. Paternalistic relationship and dependency ensue, and this in turn disempower the people in the community from contributing to a transformative partnership. In this study, we examine how undergraduate students, as part of the university, are hindered to form a transformative partnership with the individuals in a community. Using Masrow's transformation theory as a lens to understand students' perceptions, we specifically look into the process by which perspectives are challenged during service learning. Transformative learning, as defined by Maslow, is a learning that transforms problematic frames of reference to make them more inclusive, discriminating, reflective, open, and emotionally able to change. This involves a process of effecting change in a frame of reference or structures of assumptions through which we understand our experiences. These frames of reference selectively shape and delimit perception, cognition, and feelings by predisposing our intentions, expectations, and purposes. They consist of habits of mind, which are habitual ways of thinking, feeling, and acting, influenced by cultural, social, educational, economic, political, or psychological assumptions, and points of view which are specific articulations of our habits of mind. In contrast to points of view, habits of mind are more durable and less accessible to feedback and awareness raising. Frames of reference can be transformed according to Measure through critical reflection on the assumptions upon which our interpretations, beliefs, and habits of mind or points of view are based. Critical reflection is usually prompted when there are discrepancies between one's beliefs and experiences, because we tend to make a tacit judgment to move toward a way of thinking or behaving that we deem more appropriate to our new situation. For transformative partnership to come about in service learning, we argue that transformative learning has to be fostered during the teaching learning process. Individuals have to be supported in examining the premise of their deeply held assumptions so that points of view, and most importantly, habits of mind hindering such individuals to relate authentically with each other, can be transformed. In this case study, we look into a group of third-year undergraduate students from a Philippine-based Jesuit university taking up service learning in a primary healthcare setting from August to December 2016 as part of their curriculum for a health-related degree. This service learning initiative formed part of the discipline-based formation program that the university seeks to provide its students, making concepts discussed in classes for health professional as scientist or investigator, and for philosophy of the human person more meaningful and relevant because of its practical approach. By assigning 78 students to render community service in 14 healthcare centers in Marikina City, the service learning was not only meant to prepare students on the role of healthcare professionals in public health, but it also aimed to give students the opportunities to contribute to the delivery of primary healthcare to the urban poor. To get familiar with the service learning situated in a primary healthcare setting, participant observation was done in several instances as students attended classes and went to the healthcare centers for community service. Social events that were directly observed were recorded as field notes, so as to provide context to the study because, as G elaborates, any aspect of context can affect the meaning of an oral or written utterance. The reflection papers submitted by student participants during their service learning were also collected after these were marked so that insights can be gathered on how students perceive their service learning experience. To examine the barriers to a transformative partnership with a given community, and to look into the process by which students' perspectives were challenged during service learning, the submitted reflection papers underwent discourse analysis, which is useful in studying the use of language to convey situated meanings. Days before deployment to the healthcare centers, students were oriented about the purpose and nature of their service learning. Most, if not all, were anxious of what their service learning will entail from them. Some students felt overwhelmed because it appears they have to allot so much of their time for the health center. Since service learning does not seem to be their usual academic requirements, students such as Isabella also felt pressured, knowing that their responsibilities for service learning are quite a lot and are heavy. These responsibilities involve taking the vital signs of patients, delivering lectures to promote health and wellness, retrieving, filing, and arranging patients' records, measuring the length and weight of infants for vaccination, among others. As a result, Emma, for instance, senses there is more for them to learn so that they can be able to greatly contribute to the community. This perceived need to acquire certain competencies for service learning is an understandable reaction among the students, but they should not let their overwhelmed feelings to take hold of them and incapacitate them from learning. Based on reflective accounts of students about their orientation, we have also identified a number of concerns which may hinder students from undergoing transformative learning and building transformative partnership with the community. These include the students' tendency to become self-centered and their notion that people from the service learning community are different from them in many aspects. Such egocentrism among students was made apparent when the teachers asked the class to group themselves for the service learning. In general, students considered to be with their peers who are familiar and useful to them. Caitlin, for example, chose to be in a group which she can have a sense of security as well as comfort. Similarly, many students elected to be with those they are comfortable with and they will not encounter any difficulties. In the case of Matthew, he would rather belong to a group of students who can do a great job and be able to work in any kind of conditions because his grades depend on them. Ava, on the other hand, would prefer someone who has a car as part of her group so that they can all comfortably travel to the healthcare center. Because some groups had more individuals than the required size, the teachers requested the students to regroup themselves. But a number of students, as described by Ryan and Sarah, did not want to step out of their comfort zone and were adamant that they assemble themselves first, and thus were unyielding and unwilling to arrange themselves. For Ava, she even volunteered as one of the 14 leaders so that the group she and her friends formed would remain together. This self-centeredness can be a hindrance to transformative relationship because, as Sophia realized, it prevents them from being sensitive to others and being open to working with people who are not in their circle of friends. When the groups were then asked by their teachers to decide which healthcare center they will be assigned for their service learning, everyone, as Hannah observed, tries again to put their own interests first. Most students, like Mia, would want to be assigned in the nearest and most accessible venue of all. Some groups, according to Sarah, were plainly keen on avoiding the hassle of a long commute. As for Ryan, among others, they took into account the time they have to wake up to be at the health center by 8 in the morning and the time it will take for them to get back to school so they will have enough time to study for their other classes. Eventually, some students learned to negotiate their preferences and give way to others. They came to understand the importance of considering the circumstances of other groups and the welfare of the class. For example, two groups gave way for another group when they learned most of the students from the latter resided far from Marikina, and it would therefore be practical for them to be assigned to the nearest healthcare center. In listening to others, and as termed by Hannah, setting selfishness aside, resistance to transformative learning can be overcome. Perspective transformation and in fact transformative partnership can likewise be hindered by perceiving there are divisive differences between oneself and the people from the service learning community. As explained by Lauren, they feel that service learning will be more challenging when it comes to communication because the people who are there are not the usual people that they talk to. In fact, the thought of interacting and conversing with unfamiliar people made Anna, among others, nervous because they were asked to go out of one's comfort zone. However, such disorienting dilemma prompted some students like Samantha to allow themselves to be one with the community and to go beyond their comfort zone in terms of communicating with others and building relationships. This will include, as Sarah suggested, having to improve their social skills in order to successfully build relationships with all the diverse people that they will be interacting with. In doing so, transformative learning will not only be facilitated, but transformative partnership will also be made possible. As students spent their Wednesdays in their respective healthcare centers, service learning provided them opportunities, according to Sophia, to know more of the society they seek to create a difference in. New points of view were established as they were able to interact with mothers who have different backgrounds and experiences. Rachel, for example, was able to open herself to new perspectives because of their service learning encounters. This is because, as Victoria narrated, it's not just the one-time encounter where they get the length and weight of the babies, then never see them or their parents again. We actually remember them. We recognize their faces, and sometimes even recall their names. We share stories with them, especially when they're waiting in line for their turn. New points of view were also established as students got to interact with the healthcare workers. They learned, as stated by Julia, how to build rapport with the healthcare workers, to be in good terms, and to work comfortably with each other. For Ryan and Mia, among others, they were given opportunities to gain insights about the healthcare workers' personal experiences in the Philippine health sector, as well as their dreams and aspirations in life. Most students also found the classroom sessions helpful in making sense of their service learning experiences. They were able to gather new points of view since their Saturday sessions, as pointed out by Sarah, provided an opportunity where the students can synthesize their experience by sharing amongst themselves what happened during their service learning and seeing the similarities and differences among the different healthcare centers. These processing sessions on Saturdays, as Michelle remarked, opened her mind to the problems that the healthcare centers in their country usually face. It showed her different realities of the healthcare centers and how work in a health center was harder than it seemed. There were likewise opportunities for emancipatory learning as some points of view of students were changed during service learning. Hannah, for instance, realized that she can never really judge something at first glance since service learning was not merely something they were obliged or required to do. It essentially entailed a choice from them because how they treated the patients was up to them, how open they allowed themselves to others was up to them, and how they integrate themselves to the community was up to them. For Jen and two other students, they initially thought that they would not make an impact to the community, but were shortly shown otherwise. As Jen recounted, when they got out of the tricycle, one mother recognized them immediately. She even went out of her way to greet them and chat with them before they headed back to the health center. They didn't expect that the mothers they interact with actually remember them. They didn't expect these mothers who only stayed in the health center for around 15 minutes or so would remember the faces of students who measured the length and weight of their babies. At that point, she came to realize those small talks can be a step towards a relationship which was deeper and more personal. Although not as common, opportunities for transformative learning were documented as well in this service learning. A number of students demonstrated changes in their habits of mind as they were able to come up with personal resolutions on how they should proceed from here onwards. For example, Emma at first saw service learning as a requirement that would make her wake up at 6 in the morning just to commute to the health center. But later on, her perspective about service learning changed wherein, little by little, dreadfulness became excitement and requirement became service. Similarly, Brian no longer considered service learning as a task to accomplish, but as a form of service for the community. As a result, he has planned to join the sector-based organizations in school because he wants to interact more with marginalized sectors of society. As for Mia, she has resolved to make an effort to know about the community more, by focusing less on self-fulfillment and more on how the people in the community feel. Hannah, on the other hand, has decided to carry on everywhere, especially in the future when she becomes a doctor, the attitude of reaching out and establishing relationships with the less privileged. But there were also missed opportunities for transformative partnership and service learning. Instead of taking on a different attitude toward service learning, students' existing points of view were elaborated. In the case of Michelle, there was no Wednesday that she didn't find herself having a hard time to wake up since it was the earliest activity she had for the whole week. This predisposition for personal convenience was also evident in Ava, who frequently complained of the commute to and from the healthcare center using public transport system. For James, he was not able to have meaningful and relevant experiences in service learning as he continued to perceive the patients in the healthcare centers as not so glamorous and the tasks he had to do on Wednesdays as very monotonous. Such missed opportunities, for the most part, have stemmed from unresolved dilemmas in service learning. That is, self-interests are put ahead instead of taking into consideration the common good, while differences rather than similarities are emphasized when relating to others. These missed opportunities for a transformative partnership in service learning are due to distorted assumptions or premises which direct an individual, according to Maslow, to view reality in a way that arbitrarily limits what is included, impedes differentiation, lacks permeability or openness to other ways of seeing, or does not facilitate an integration of experience. These are, as Crampton describes, errors of learning, since what we have learned, how and where we grow up, and how we see ourselves have remained unquestioned and unexamined. Distorted assumptions or premises take place because individuals, for the most part, are unaware of how certain social norms legitimize the distribution of power and privilege in society. Furthermore, individuals have the tendency to reject ideas that fail to fit our preconceptions, labeling those ideas as unworthy of consideration, aberrations, nonsense, irrelevant, weird, or mistaken. Thus, we usually block out unwanted aspects of our realities, or we simply do not focus on them so as not to get anxious about the changes it may bring to us. In this study, lack of critical awareness and an inclination to adhere to the familiar may account for the dilemmas and missed opportunities in service learning. In many ways, this may have limited some of the students' openness to personal and social transformation. Instead of transformative learning, existing points of view about themselves and others were elaborated further in some students. But for most students, new points of view were established and existing points of view were changed because of their service learning. A number of students also exhibited an incremental change in their habits of mind as a result of accumulated changes in their points of view. In sum, students saw themselves confronted with the challenge to overcome personal barriers from authentically encountering the urban poor whom they serve in the community. Hence, establishing transformative partnership in service learning was not without its share of dilemmas. Such findings can contribute to discourses on service learning, informing practitioners how to support social transformation in university community collaboration. Thank you very much.